What's up, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of On the Bluff. I am your host, Christian Fowler, and joining me as my co-host this week, not as just producer, is Kenny Stubblefield. Gabe is not with us tonight, so just me and Kenny. So if you've been rocking with me and Kenny for a while, this is a
You
throwback for us.
know.
We've done a lot of individual podcasts together, so I promise you're in plenty of good hands. And
You know what it was? Let me tell you what happened while Gabe's not here. He got so wrapped up in my 309 conversation from last week that he was like, you know what, man, let me take a break
You
because
needed a break.
I need a break. Kenny was so right. I'm going to bring him off the sidelines and put him on the front row. That's what it was.
I guess that was the motivation, but you're in plenty good hands tonight, and you get more Kenny. So there's nothing wrong with that. You can't complain about that. So Kenny, before we jump in, we got a lot of basketball to talk about tonight. Any notes from the weekend? You have a busy weekend. I don't think you're able to watch much sports this weekend, from what it sounded like.
Man, let me tell you, dude. When are you and Anna Ruth getting married? How soon? When are we getting married here? What's going on?
I can't say because
She's not watching. Don't worry about it.
No, she listens.
Oh God. So one of the things, and I don't know if you've experienced this yet. You're a domesticated individual. You like to you are. I mean, what I mean by that is you are a very stable person. You are a guy who you love family. You love the people that you love. When you love somebody, you love them well. Like that's Christian Fowler. If you want to know anything about Christian Fowler, myself, one of the things that has happened, social media is great, right? Like social media is fine. But one of the things that it's done in my relationship with my wife is that she is on Instagram and gets and on TikTok and gets shown a lot of home type renovation type videos. Do you know what my inbox on Instagram looks like from
all
Tracy?
renovation videos, I'm assuming.
All renovation videos from Tracy. So that was my weekend. This weekend was catching up on Tracy's TikTok adventures.
That sounds lovely.
It was fun. I mean, I was outside. Great. It was fine. What about yours? What did you do this weekend?
What did I do this weekend? I don't remember.
Exactly.
Saturday night, me and Anna Ruth went to dinner with my sister, my brother-in-law, and my nephew.
Yeah.
We went to Chili's.
It's the second weekend in a row y'all done that.
Yeah, we did it 2 weeks ago on Friday night, this week on Saturday night. Oh, Friday night was our Friendsgiving. I don't know how I forgot that, but we had Friendsgiving on Friday night. So there was I think there was 16 or 17 of us. Everybody brought food and hung out and, just celebrated basically all being friends with each other, which we do Friendsgiving and like a Christmas thing every year.
Yeah, love that.
I think we're like 4 years in now on doing that, which means that, we're becoming older and more mature.
Have the kids, the number of kids continuously gone up every year? Like, is it
the number of kids last year was 0.
And now how many is it?
There three of the people that were there have kids, but only 2 of them brought them, which was my sister and then Michael and his wife brought their daughter. But yeah, three of my friends that were there have kids, and one that was supposed to be there actually had their daughter on Wednesday. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So we just got another new addition.
Wow. That's crazy.
Yeah. No, there are babies coming left and right from my friend group. So if you account for the one that was born on Wednesday, we went from 0 last year to we would have had 4 this year. So it's growing.
It's growing quickly, man.
Yes,
it's growing quickly.
Very, very quickly.
I love the Friendsgiving thing. If I had friends, we would probably do a Friendsgiving, but I don't have any friends, so it's all good.
Yeah, no, it's it's a little sad. You think
I'm joking. I'm
just
joking.
depressed, everyone. But no, it is a lot of fun because, especially for me, I've been friends with the same people literally my entire life. Yeah. Most of my friends, if not all of them, are decade plus.
Yeah,
and I'm 26, so yeah. I mean, most of my friends are we're 13 to
Yeah.
15 years, something like that. And me and Michael are like 18, 19 years now. So
Yep.
it's cool. I think especially with everybody getting married and having kids and stuff, you value that time a little bit more than you used to when it was every Friday and every Saturday and every Sunday, like you saw your friends all weekend. And so that time is being more valued now.
And
So
I'm sure the get-togethers look completely different now than what they did a few years ago. Just even like a few years ago, they
oh
probably look
yeah, oh yeah,
completely different.
it's way more chill,
Yes.
which is cool with me.
Which you're
Like that
fine with. You're good
that
with.
it fits for me much better with how much it's slowed down. Like it used to be everybody's staying until like 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, and now it's like 10, 10:30. Everybody's like, it's time to
Hey,
roll
bro, it's
out.
time to roll. We got some stuff to do. We got
Yeah,
kids to put to bed. We got to go. Yeah. No, I feel you, man. I feel you.
yeah,
You're gonna start eating dinner a lot earlier. Like 5 o'clock is the norm for us at the Stubblefield house. We eat dinner at 5. It's life changes when
it
kids are
does.
present, bro. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's a different world. But speaking of a different world, Memphis did something very impressive tonight. We're recording this on Monday night. It's barely past 6 o'clock, so we are literally right off of the hills of Memphis beating number 2 UConn in the opening round of the Maui Invitational. It was at 2:30 this afternoon local time, 9:30 in Hawaii. I can't imagine waking up and playing a basketball game at
It
9:30 in the morning.
it was actually at 1:30 is when it started here. It started at
Was it
1:30. Yeah.
1:30 here?
So 2:30
Yeah,
Eastern. Yeah.
yeah. So for me, it was tough. I'm sure for a lot of Memphis fans out there, it was tough to watch this game. If I was in an office setting, it would have been a lot
Right.
easier to watch this game. But constantly on the go, I wasn't really able to get too much of it. I was able to hit a little bit of it. But this is a massive win. This is fair to say biggest win in Penny Hardaway era, at least on paper for as far as where the
Well, he
team
said
was.
it. He said it. He said it's the
Did he?
biggest one of his career. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. I mean, you beat the back-to-back defending national champions, and at this point, we don't know who UConn is. I mean, we were talking about this pre-show. So far this season, they have played Sacred Heart, New Hampshire, Lemoyne, and East Texas A&M. So this is kind of honestly on Dan Hurley, and at least to a little bit of an extent, because they have played no one and they were not ready for a
Yeah.
quality opponent clearly in this game. So we don't know what UConn's going to look like the rest of the season. Regardless, they're a really good basketball team. They're well coached.
Huh.
So it's a huge win. It's a marquee win for Memphis, and they got a really good win on Friday night as well over San Francisco, having to go all the way across the country pretty much and play a really solid San Francisco team and win that game, and
Yeah.
then go from there, come back to Memphis, and then go to Hawaii and take on the number 2 team in the country
Yeah.
and win. It was an impressive, 3 or 4 days for the Memphis basketball program.
Well, and I'll say this even to that, like the Tigers were smart in that they actually didn't come back to Memphis after the San
They
Francisco
went they
game.
went straight.
They
Yeah.
went straight. They've been in Maui now for like 2 or 3 days. And
Yeah.
so which was smart because like it was 1:30 p.m. time our time when the game started. It was 9:30 in the morning in Maui.
Yeah, you got to
So
adjust.
so they went like Penny purposefully scheduled that San Francisco game to get them ready for Maui. And it was, you know, we're going to talk about UConn, obviously the biggest part of this segment, but that San Francisco win, it was something that, I had conversations with Penny over the week where I was like, man, help Tiger fans understand how good of a team this is. Like this team is like, are they world beaters? No, but they are more than likely, Christian, better than anybody the Tigers will face in the AAC conference this year.
Yeah, I think
Um,
that's fair. I think that's a fair assessment.
and they went into their house and they beat them. And so, you know, they if you're thinking of like scheduled losses like you hear about in the NBA and even in the NFL at times, like that San Francisco game was clearly a potential scheduled loss of
Yeah.
you go on the road and you play a tough team, 2-hour time difference, like tough team in their home, even though it wasn't in their Christian. They call it a neutral game because it was 5 miles away from their home court. They played at the Chase Center.
It was neutral site.
Neutral site
A lot
game.
of a lot of Memphis fans in San Francisco.
I saw somebody say, it'd be like Memphis saying it's a neutral game because they played in the Pyramid instead of the FedEx Forum or
Yeah,
something.
literally.
I'm like, that's exactly what it is.
Yeah. And I was just looking as you were talking there at Ken Palm, and San Francisco's 57. The second highest ranked team in the American is North Texas at 73. So at least at where we sit right now, you are correct in saying that that is the best team that Memphis will see, or better team in San Francisco that Memphis will see
Yeah.
in the American for the remainder of the year. But let's really dive into this UConn win. Like I mentioned, I wasn't able to catch a ton of this game, so I'm not going to front on that.
Let me ask you a question.
Yeah,
Before the season started, if I had, we saw the schedule come out. They were playing in the Maui. First round was going to be against UConn. If I were to ask you, like, hey, on November 25th, like, what's the likelihood that they beat UConn in the first round of the Maui Invitational? Like, what do you would you would have been? Nah, it's not happening, right?
yeah. No, I mean, I think coming into this game, really the hope had to be Memphis is competitive, they hang in there, and kind of like the Alabama and North Carolina exhibition games. Like
Absolutely.
just be competitive.
Right.
Let's see it be solid from the first half and not fall behind from a wide margin, which they didn't do that. I think it was 40-40 at halftime, if I'm not mistaken on that. So it was tied at half. Um, and they played well throughout the entire game. So the expectation, or the highest of expectations, probably would have been stay in there the whole game, be
Right.
competitive, make UConn sweat.
Yeah.
But to be able to be able to beat them, regardless of where it was played at and all the circumstances, it's extremely impressive. And you start looking at some of the box scores from this game, and we've talked so much about PJ Haggerty kind of being the 1A and Tyrese Hunter being the 1B. And I think one big takeaway from this game is that, kind of in the same sense, because we're going to keep this comparison all year of the 2022 team with Kendrick
Yeah.
Davis and DeAndre Williams, and just the similarities that this team has to that team. And there were games in that season where DeAndre kind of became the 1A and Kendrick was the 1B, and it has to be kind of this symbiotic relationship of, if one player's not playing their best, you need the other guy to take over. And Tyrese Hunter showed against UConn that he can do that. I mean, 7 of 10 from three, leading the team in scoring. Memphis shot almost 55% from three in this game. And that's another conversation I think is
Yeah.
interesting
We're
because,
gonna have that. Well, I mean, like, he single-handedly paced the Tigers in the second half with the UConn team as a whole. Yeah,
yeah,
I think at one point in the second half, he had 20. The UConn had scored 20 points in the second half, and Tyrese had scored 17 by himself. So yeah, I mean, there definitely. You remember back in the 2022 season with Kendrick and DeAndre, and let's be frank about it. Like, Kendrick was phenomenal at the back end of that season, especially going into the conference tournament and all that. And obviously they had the game against FAU, where he still played a great game, but they ultimately lost that game. But in a lot of ways, the ball was in Kendrick's hands a lot during that season, but DeAndre was 1A pretty much that entire regular season. He definitely, there were moments where Kendrick won games for them, and there were moments where he did really good things. But yeah, you're right. Like, in terms of the comparison of the two teams, having that kind of that 1A 1B type of relationship between your two best players, um, has worked for Penny in the past, and it's working for him right now.
yeah. And just to kind of further that team had two guys, and past that, there wasn't
It
much.
was a
Like,
crapshoot. It was a
right.
crapshoot. You never
Like,
knew.
you had a couple games where Keontae Kennedy played well offensively, like high output numbers. You had
Right.
maybe a game or two where Elijah McCadden had some high output numbers, but it was the way that those two went,
Oh yeah.
and that's his team as well. Like, I think PJ Haggerty and Tyrese Hunter are definitely the engine, but you look at Dane Danger now, the last two games, 32 points in the last two games between the best competition that Memphis has seen this year in
Yeah.
San Francisco and UConn. So he's averaging 16 in those games. Colby Rogers against UConn, 19. points and 3 of 6 from three, and you say they have a lot of supplementary pieces to
Absolutely.
this team. I mean, it's a very well rounded team. Gabe brought up PJ Carter last week, kind of doing what he does and just coming off the bench and hitting a shot, hitting a big three.
He did it
And
in overtime. He had 9 points. He scored all 9 of his points in overtime. One of them was we in the Tigers Live post-game show that we did, we talked about the moments of the games, and we had plenty of like it was almost too difficult because the game was so long and so in the like it was so in the moment. Every single possession mattered, every single possession counted. We talked about that PJ Carter 3-pointer in the overtime where I think it was Caravan had come down, or maybe it was Liam McNeely. I can't remember which one it was, but one of them came down and hit a 3-pointer to put the Yukon Huskies up by 4 in overtime. And PJ, fresh off the bench, hadn't seen many minutes whatsoever, came in and just rained a 3. It honestly felt like it was that momentum shifter of like, hey, we're still here and we're not going away.
yeah,
And he did that. Not only did he do that, he hit 4 straight free throws, one a couple after the Dan Hurley tech. I mean, it was just phenomenal pickup by PJ Carter in that game. Yes.
yeah. There's a there's a couple kind of ebbs and flows and just points overall in this game I want to talk about. 3 or 4 of them, like I said. First one is how impressed are you with the resiliency from this team? Because I think the big thing in this game, when you look at it, is you wouldn't have been surprised if Memphis lost this down the stretch. They pull away in the second half, and then UConn comes storming back. I think they were down by 13 at the most. They come back,
Yep.
they send the game to overtime. It feels like they have all the momentum at that point. I know I was thinking that's kind of the death knell.
That's
Like
a wrap, right? Like that's
if
a
they
wrap.
were going to do it, they had to put that away in regulation, and now they're giving one of the best teams in the country
Right.
another chance, and they feel like they have new life. So
Yeah.
that's huge for this team to be able to do. I think it shows once again they're veterans. They have the correct leadership, because if you don't, that's a situation you absolutely blow up in.
Yeah. I mean, I think from the beginning, even the beginning of the game, one of the things that we've talked about numerous times on this podcast and on other podcasts across the Bluff City Media Network is that, you want to make sure that the Tigers have shown over the first previous 4 games that they've been able to make adjustments at halftime and claw their way back into a game. And the response to that is okay, that works for against teams like Ohio,
Yeah,
right? Or that works against teams like even a Missouri team who is just not at the same stratosphere or the same level of competition as like a UConn. And that was, what there was a question coming into the game of like, what kind of a response are they going to give, right, when they're tested?
yeah,
Um, and teams like UConn who have that level of history and number 2s next to their name and 2-time defending champion and a head coach like Dan Hurley, you just go, man, you want to come in and not only not only throw punches, but you want to be able to take punches as well. And within the fact that the Tigers came out in that first part of the first half and even going into the second media timeout at 12 minutes, the fact that they were in there, the fact that they were in the lead, the fact that they were showed me a lot about this team. But I think you're 100% right. Like the resiliency to never let go of the rope. I honestly, and this is why I'll say 2 things about that. For me, the resiliency comes from where they find their identity. What is their identity in? Their identity is in what Penny Hardaway has always wanted his team's identity to be on, and that's on the defensive side of the floor.
yeah,
When your identity is based on offense, which can ebb and flow, and refs can make calls that you don't like that can change the momentum of the game. If your identity is in that, then in a lot of ways your resiliency can falter because of that, right? Like you can get super frustrated by missing shots. This team does not feel like they get frustrated at
no,
all by missed shots, by the offensive side of the floor. It feels like when things get tough, they automatically think, okay, defensively, what can we do? and that to me is a sign of a team. Number one, I love that kind of team. I love it. And number two, it tells me that what we saw today was not a fluke.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it says a lot because I think at least the majority of Memphis fans probably if Memphis loses this game in overtime just kind of goes,
It,
man, we pushed them
hey,
to the brink. They stole one. We just got overwhelmed. We just weren't ready. But they didn't get overwhelmed. And I think that's just an incredibly positive sign for this team moving forward. Also, I want to talk about 3-point shooting because we talked about this last week. And we're like, Memphis leads the country in 3-point shooting, but there's no way. We know that's not going to hold. And I think they're going to come back to earth at some point. Like, I mean, shooting 55% from three is obviously not going to be the norm. But I think we might have to start changing this narrative. I mean Memphis is 5 games in now with a couple of these other tournament games coming up, but they're shooting really well. I think overall field goal percentage they were like second in the country also. So they've
yeah,
just been a really good shooting team. They were 54.7 from the floor and 54.5 from three against UConn. So
yeah,
they can shoot the ball. I think that's fair to say at this point.
and even surprise upon surprise, they are a damn good shooting free throw team too.
Yes, finally.
Finally, right? Like, has that not always been the thing that we've said about the Tigers? They just can't shoot free throws,
Yeah.
right? But I love it because even Musa, was I think when he was at Memphis, and I had to look at the numbers again, looking back, but I think he was like a 20% free throw shooter at Memphis, and that man is like 1 for 2, will sometimes hit 2 for 3. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? And I'm like, give me that all day long with this team. I I think that are the Tigers a good shooting team? You would say no, right? Like you before the season started, you'd be like, that's just not
100%.
going to be their
100%.
strength,
Yeah.
right? Like the ball is going to be in the hands of PJ Haggerty, and look what he did at Tulsa last year. Now, obviously, some reports came out at the beginning of this year that he was dealing with an undisclosed hand injury that not even the Tulsa coaches knew about. That he because they knew that they wouldn't let him play. Which I was like, okay, that's a dog. If that's the
Yeah,
case,
definitely.
that's a dog. But I was hearing reports from people that were at the Tiger facility saying this kid's a shooter. Watch out. And we're like, okay, like listen, I've seen enough videos of Ben Simmons hitting 3-pointers in the offseason and Steven Adams hitting 3-pointers in the offseason to make me go, okay, I don't care much about offseason footage. But I think the thing that I like the most about it is that it seems this is the mantra that I'll say about this Tigers team, and specifically when it comes to the shooting side of it, is that everything they're doing seems very repeatable.
They get such good
They're
looks.
getting good looks, bro. Like they're getting their offense, their shots are coming in the flow of the offense, which is so unique to not only just the Tigers but college
College
basketball
basketball,
in
because
general.
it's the selflessness with this team,
Mm.
and I think that's a big problem that we see with teams that struggle to get good looks is there's just a lot of selfishness,
Yeah,
and this team just doesn't have that. They're fine with moving the ball and getting open looks, and it clearly is working for them. Last point, and then we can run to the hot three. I do have a question about this tournament style for Memphis. You
yeah,
look at Memphis's 3 best players and PJ Haggerty, Tyrese Hunter, and Colby Rogers. 37, 40, and 39 minutes. Now, obviously, this is an overtime game, so there's a little bit of an asterisk next to that. But still, you're going to get heavy minutes from those guys. Can they hold that up? And we've asked this question for weeks now because we knew that this was going to be the way that this team worked out.
yeah.
And so I think that is going to be one of the most telling things
100%.
about the remainder of this tournament. Because if
100%.
Memphis is going to have the success that they could have this year, if they're going to reach the heights and reach the ceiling that they could reach this year, they're going to have to, especially those 3 guys, are going to have to be able to hold up overplaying a lot of minutes in a lot of different basketball games. It's just going to have to happen. And this isn't even an injury conversation because that we can't predict that. Who knows what
No.
happens there?
Yeah.
It's just can they hold up to it? Like that, can they continue to perform night in, night out, playing 32 to 40 minutes per game? Obviously depending on if it's an overtime game or a super tight game throughout. Can they hold up enough to continue to be effective, especially in a tournament atmosphere?
That's a real question. I think that's
Yeah.
a very fair question to ask because this is, I mean, how wild is it that we are having this conversation after 6 years of covering Penny Hardaway's teams where we've been like, "You're playing 14 players in the
Too
first
much.
half,
Yeah.
bro. What are you doing?" Right? Like, why shorten your rotations? And now it's like, okay, he played 8 guys today in an overtime game.
Yeah.
That's crazy, right?
Yeah.
But, I think that's a legit question. Obviously there were some reports that came out this week that, Tyrese and PJ have been dealing with nagging knee injuries. And there were some questions about potentially Tyrese's, like what he was going to be able to continue to do. And, there's been reports that Tyrese and PJ have not, not reports, Penny has said it, since the Missouri game, they haven't practiced.
Yeah.
Um, and that is
Concerning.
it's concerning. I would say, yeah. I think PJ's injury is definitely uh his was more of a because I have the footage of it. It was when Musa fell into his knee on a loose ball rebound. It was more of a hyperextension, and so obviously, man, if you've hyperextended your knees, it hurts for a while, and you got to kind of just work through it and get through it. But I think that's a legit question, and I say I like that. I like having to have that question answered more so than having why are we playing 14 players?
100%. 100%. You would much rather know the guys that are
Yeah,
gonna lead the team and that need to be on the floor rather than we don't even know who the best 5 are. A
right.
and we're seeing 10 different lineup combinations in a game, and we're seeing 12 players play 10 plus minutes in a game. I mean, it is so much better to have it concise and to know who's gonna be on the floor in crunch time and to know your best lineups and to know just overall where you're most effective.
Let me
Um,
ask you this before it does your concern about that, like your like the questions around can they survive, can they sustain these minutes throughout the a long season, would that cause you, because Penny has been asked multiple times over the last couple of weeks, like, about adding a player in December, um, potentially a guard, right? Which sounds like something that they would need is because they're having to use their guards at a crazy pace right now.
yeah,
Would you would your concern over them being able to sustain it, like, would it cause you to go, okay, the concern about potentially messing with the chemistry of what this team has? Like,
it,
would you be okay with that?
I don't know. To me, that's one of the most like sacred things in basketball, especially at the collegiate
It's the
level.
locker room,
It
man.
is, yeah, locker room and just messing with your chemistry. And right now, you don't have anybody looking over their shoulder or anyone questioning what their role is or if it's going to change. Like it's pretty set in stone right now who's going to play
Oh yeah.
and the allotted minutes that they get and what their role is. And so bringing someone in can just seriously jeopardize that and jeopardize everyone's morale. Even if
People like to use Naquan Tomlin's, coming onto the team last year as a reason why the Tigers went from being top 10 in the country to, losing 4 straight in the AAC. Um, I want everybody to remember that it wasn't Naquan Tomlin that, like, Naquan was never an issue for the Tiger team. Like, he was never an issue in the locker room. The team loved him. It was more so, to be honest with you, and not to continue. I don't want to bring. We're on a high of beating UConn today, but it was more so the return of Jordan Brown, and it was
right.
the injury to Caleb Mills
Yeah.
that kind
I
of
I would say my biggest thing would be if they're going to add someone, like it needs to be one of those quiet things of just
yeah.
like it does not have no one even needs to know who this guy is, right? It just needs to be if you're going to add someone, a player that can, if they have to play 5 to 10 minutes per game, they can do that,
That's
and that's it. So honestly, if it was me, I don't even mess with it. I let it ride, and if the problem comes up, then we deal with it. Then maybe we try to do something at
But
that
then what
point.
happens if PJ gets injured? Like, right, not
Right? I
that
mean,
I don't
you're
you know what? I don't even wanna put that out in the ether like that, but what
but
happens?
even if it does, you're not going to find anybody to replace that production anyway. You
That's
know
right.
what I'm saying?
There's
Like,
nobody out there that's not playing ball right now that's gonna
right.
replace a PJ Haggerty, right?
No, and you might get someone who can come in and play some solid minutes, but you're not making up for that.
No,
So to me, it's like don't jeopardize it.
I agree.
if you feel like you just absolutely have to, just make it someone who's under the radar, just wants to work and be in the situation where they can help, not someone who's looking to come in and make a name and mess this team up chemistry wise. Like,
Give me
honestly, I'm fine with them just letting it ride out.
yeah.
And if something happens where they need to, if an injury occurs or something like that, cross that bridge at that point. But don't ruin what's going on right now, especially.
Give me one more Baraka Okoji, and I will call it a day.
Exactly. Someone like that who, if they play 15 minutes and score 2 points, they couldn't care less. Like that. That's who you want.
And will dog on defense.
Exactly.
Just a defensive dog. Like that's what I want. Yeah. If you need to. If you don't, if it's not a necessity, then don't do it. But yeah, if you need to, do that. But
yeah. All right, Kenny. Well, we are going to take a quick break. I can't even do a cool segue tonight because you're already on here. So
I'm here.
No cool, fun segue because Kenny's been on the show already the whole time. So we're going to take a quick break, and we will be back on the other side with the Hot 3.
It's not great. Grade 3 is about as severe as you could get. There's a grade 4 that comes with an avulsion where the ligament not only ruptures, but it pulls some bone off. So thankfully we didn't get that.
That can happen?
Oh, yeah. So they called it a grade 3, which means basically that there is a ligament that runs from the long shin bone and it connects your shin bone to your foot to make it as easy as I possibly can. Then it's about that big. Well, when you roll that ankle, it'll get stretched. And that's what Zach Edey did. That's what most of us has done in our athletic career. What Vince actually did is ruptured that little ligament. We'll call it the ATFL. He ruptured that. So there's going to have to be some healing. The body's going to have to lay down some collagen fiber, some scar tissue to try and get that thing to reconnect. Basically, yes, we're reevaluating him in 4 weeks. I'll be shocked if we see him playing any sooner than 6, probably 8 weeks.
Tune into the Daily Grind with your host, Lute Hatmaker, every Monday through Friday at 7:30 a.m. live on the Bluff City Media YouTube channel.
Jake has had a great season, all things considered. Jake Arabia in his third season. He's showing the league, the Grizzlies fans, that he is a competent NBA player, and I'm okay with that. Like, you know, like I'm fine with just that he's proven that he's an actual player in the NBA, because he was not showing us that for the last couple of years. He's been a very pleasant surprise, and almost a necessary surprise. With guys like Vince Williams out, I just think we as a fan base just have to calm down. Like, if we've seen him, he's one of the true build-a-bear projects, like I say, with this organization and with this team, where they take a guy and give him every opportunity to succeed. Opportunities that other teams probably wouldn't give a guy. You know what I mean? Most teams, a guy like Jake the Raven would not have made it to this point. So, like I said, he's gone from being a guy who's looked terrible to a guy who's looked like a competent NBA player. And I'm fine with just kind of stopping it right there.
Tune in to The Anthony Sane Show, Wednesdays and Fridays at 12 p.m. weekly on the Bluff City Media YouTube channel. What up, my guy? Hey, I got a funny stat for you. Are you ready for this? Kind of going back to the Tigers, and are they a good shooting team? I just saw this in the Discord, and I thought you would love it. The Tiger, what would you consider to be like a decent college three-point shooting percentage for a player, for an individual? Like, if you were to say, this is the number, this guy goes from being good to being like a guy that I would trust to shoot three-pointers.
Like 36, 37.
37%?
I'd say so.
Yeah, the Tigers' worst point shooter on the team this year is shooting 37%.
That's insane. That is absolutely nuts.
Isn't that bonkers, dude?
Yeah, that definitely is.
That's crazy. Anyway, let's get to the hot three.
Do it.
Again, I was doing a lot of family stuff around the house today, so I didn't get to watch a whole lot of college football today. But dude, I wrote this down. Where is my pen?
You lost it.
I lost it. I had it somewhere. The number Was it 19?
16, 15, 14, 9, 7, 5, all lost.
Chaos, bro.
That would be, or maybe it was 15, 14, 13. Either
No,
way.
it was 16, 15, 14, I think is what you said.
16, 15, 14 would have been BYU, A&M, and Colorado, who all lost. A&M lost in a 4 overtime thriller to Auburn. And then you had Ole Miss went to Gainesville and lost. Bama loses to a bad Oklahoma team.
How did they lose that? Okay.
No idea. And then Indiana gets waxed by Ohio State, which
Were you surprised?
No, not at all. But Indiana had, I think it was 103rd strength of schedule so far this season, and the only team that they've played with a winning record so far beat them by 4 scores. So that'll be interesting.
Okay, so you're sitting. You're. Is it?
They're out.
Signetti.
Yeah.
Signetti gets asked, "Is Indiana still a college football playoff team?" And he said, "That's a ridiculous question." Is it a ridiculous question?
No, they shouldn't be in. They shouldn't be in. I truly believe that. Like, and if they are in, it's got to be at the very end, because when you look at right now in the rankings, and obviously AP rankings don't mean anything at this point, but they're sitting at 10, so they dropped 5 spots.
Yeah.
I don't know. I really don't know. I think obviously the other teams losing helped them out. Like Bama losing is big, because if a 2-loss Bama versus a 1-loss Indiana,
yeah,
you give it to Bama all day. Same thing with Ole Miss. If they don't lose to Florida, I would have put them in over Indiana. So it's close just because of the other teams that lost. I think A&M, Bama, Ole Miss would have all been teams that I would have put in over Indiana. Clemson is a maybe, just because they've played much tougher competition. I don't know. I probably wouldn't put them in if some of those other teams would have won. At this point, I'd say you almost have to, because there's not many 2-loss teams out there anymore. Okay, just let me give you this. So Oregon's the only undefeated team, right? And then you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 1-loss teams. And then it's Georgia and Tennessee are at 6 and 7. They're both 2-loss. Clemson's at 12 with 2 losses. Arizona State, Kenny Dillingham, 9 and 2. Iowa State, Tulane, BYU. Like, there's just not. This weekend was insane. Like, this weekend totally blew up the whole bracket, because Ole Miss probably doesn't make it now. Bama probably doesn't make it now. Both of those teams were virtual locks because they were favored. They were both favored in their last 2 games by a pretty wide margin. I don't know. This is the fun of it, right? I mean, 12-team playoff, we expanded it, and the chaos, which used to be kind of few and far between.
Oh,
because
yeah.
top 4 teams, like maybe every couple weeks you get a loss or you get a marquee win. But with this 12-team format, like, you're getting upsets every week that shift these rankings completely. I mean, you had Indiana drop 5 spots, SMU come up 4 spots, Bama drop 6, Ole Miss drop 6, Clemson come up 5, BYU drop 5, A&M drop 5. So we just have like this mass movement every week of who's in that bracket. So I'm huge on the 12 team. I think it is. I think it makes it so much more fun, because those chaotic weekends where things massively change.
They're so few in college football. They're so few and far between. But I think
now they're so apparent.
Now
like,
they're so
it's every week. It used to kind of just be small isolated events, and now it is an every weekend event where you're like, how do they determine that the movement is going to be insane? And so,
are you a fan of potentially going to the 16 or even higher? Like, would you do more teams?
No, because I think then you start getting in the teams that really don't deserve to have a chance to compete for a national championship. In my opinion, 12 is kind of the limit.
But don't you think though that, like, the greatest tournament in all of sports is March Madness?
Agreed. But
because of the FAU from like 2 years ago right?
But there's a much higher percent chance of a basketball team upsetting someone than a football team.
100%.
Because in basketball, you just get one guy that gets hot and you can win that game. But in college football, it's not the same. And I think if you expand, you're opening up to a lot more blowouts in playoff.
Let's not forget, the committee made a choice last year specifically. Florida State was dominant the entire year, lost Jordan Travis to that devastating injury, and made the decision to leave them out because, let's be frank, it was going to be a blowout. Like, whoever they played, it was going to be bad.
I mean, they played Georgia in their bowl game, and they lost like 63-8 or something, or maybe it was 63-0 or something like that. And so I think if you expand, you're just opening up blowouts because you're getting more teams in there that maybe aren't power 4 teams or kind of not lower end, but just
no, it makes sense.
Not as competitive like an Iowa State. I mean, are they going to go play at Georgia? They're going to lose by 40 points. You know what I'm saying? Like with 12 teams, I still think you're compact enough to say most of these games are going to be good, competitive. Yeah. Like you're going to have a lot of really tight, good games, and if you expand it, I think it's just too much. So I like it where it's at. I'm excited to get to the point where we start playing them because we get a month of college football, playoff football, kind of like we do in the NFL. We get a month of playoff football. We get the same thing in college now. And
all right, so based on the chaos from this past weekend, in terms of the college football playoff rankings, who was the biggest winner? Who was the biggest loser?
The biggest losers, I think, is Indiana.
Indiana, gotta be.
I mean, they had their only shot and they pissed down their leg. I think even if they're competitive in this game, if it's a one-score game, then the committee's going, okay, they're for real.
For real.
Like, they didn't come to Columbus and win, but man, they look like they belong. They look like they belonged for like the first drive, and then after that, it was pretty much shot. They had 0 yards in the second quarter. So I'll say the first quarter they looked like they belonged. Second quarter they didn't gain a single yard. They couldn't do anything, and that was kind of the story from then on out. So I'd say they were the biggest loser. The biggest winner might have honestly been Tennessee, because they were the last team out. They were on the outside looking in. So they had to have some help to have a chance to get in, even if they would have won out, because UTEP and Vandy were their last 2 games, so they weren't going to impress anyone with winning either one of those. But Bama lost, Ole Miss lost, and Florida lost, and Bama and Florida
won. Yeah,
Bama and Ole Miss were both in last week, with Bama being 7, Ole Miss 9. Those teams were both in. They're both on the outside looking in now. So Tennessee might have been the biggest winner because their path got cleared to where if they beat Vanderbilt, they're in, and they had to have help to get in. Also, A&M losing helped them out a lot because A&M had a pretty strong resume as well. They only had 2 losses, but they only had 1 conference loss. So, Tennessee, all they did was play UTEP and win that game as they should have, but the losses catapulted them up in the rankings enough to where all they have to do now is win their final game against Vandy, and they're in.
I have one last SEC question for you. DJ Lagway obviously came back last week, I think, from an injury, a pretty severe hamstring injury. Florida looks like a totally different team when he's out there, and he's a true freshman, right?
Yeah.
Have you ever seen, what are your expectations for him moving forward? Number one, how good can Florida be next year? Because they were on the outs bad at the beginning of this year. Billy Napier almost fired, and now he could potentially, with what they've done, he could potentially be coach of the year. Potentially. Is DJ Lagway just that good, or like what is it? What do you see in him?
I think he just brings a different dynamic, obviously, with being able to run the ball. Graham Mertz, what you have in him. Like, he's not moving around very much, and he's pretty limited with his arm. But DJ Lagway, big, strong, fast, can throw the ball, can run the ball. Like, he just brings a different dynamic and a different element. And even though he's not, like, lighting the world on fire or anything, it's not like he's put up these gaudy stats. He's just a threat, and he opens up the run game. And Florida's good at running the ball, and they've got a pretty solid defense. And so I think he changes the way that you have to defend them, and just allows for more stuff from their offense, more running lanes for their running backs, and then their defense has been really solid. I mean, they, like you said, they went from Billy Napier was pretty much a lock to be fired to they beat top 25 teams in back-to-back weeks.
It's crazy. All right, let's get to topic number 2, NFL football. I think one of the bigger storylines of the year. We got to see it all on Hard Knocks, right? Like we got to see kind of how all of it played out.
Yeah.
The Giants had to make a decision. The New York Giants had to make a decision, at least in their own brain. They had to make this decision on, are we going to keep Saquon Barkley or are we going to keep Daniel Jones? And they ended up ultimately choosing to keep Daniel Jones.
Well, but like they kind of had, I mean, they couldn't really get rid of Daniel Jones. It wasn't like a either or. It was like, look, we're paying this quarterback all this money, and he needs to be able to win us games, and we're not going to pay a running back $12 million. Is basically what it boiled down to.
Based on what we've seen this year, Saquon, what did he run for? I saw it. I have 255. Just has been dominating this year. Daniel Jones just literally got released by the Giants this week.
It is
Is this
insane.
the biggest? Is this like? We call it the biggest blunder, but you and Gabe have talked about it for years, where you talk about the need to have a franchise quarterback, no matter what team you are. Like, obviously, you're going to make that choice to keep a guy like Daniel Jones and pay him a lot of money. But damn, dog, like, are they going to look back and just go, oh, Christ, like we could have had Saquon, but now we kept Daniel, and Daniel's gone. Like, now he's gone.
Yeah, I mean, they have to be kicking themselves because you like go watch the Hard Knocks stuff, and the owner's son is talking about, or the GM son's talking about, like, I would draft Jaden Daniels if we could and stuff like that.
I saw that.
Need a quarterback, and they're like, we have a quarterback. Everybody on planet Earth knew that Daniel Jones was not the guy, but they had already messed up and paid him a crap ton of money.
Oh, God.
And so to see them sit back and be like, look, no one's going to pay Saquon a bunch of money anyway. Like, he's getting older. He's had injury issues. He's not explosive as he used to be. We're not missing out on anything by signing him. We're saving ourselves by letting him walk. And he currently leads the league in rushing. He has the second most yards of all time through whatever the 11 or 12 games, like almost 1,700 yards. All purpose. He had 302 yards in Sunday Night Football against the Rams, 2 touchdowns, one of 6 players in NFL history to have 270 plus rushing 270 plus yard rushing touchdowns in the same game. Yeah, they messed up. They absolutely messed up. And what makes it even worse is he went to a division opponent. And they have to see him twice a year. Like, they have to play the Eagles twice a year and watch Saquon put up historic numbers and rip them. Like, if he averages 118 yards over the next 6 games, he breaks Eric Dickerson's single season rushing record, which has stood since 1984.
So crazy, man.
I mean, it's insane. And that kind of is a microcosm of just letting you behind the door and seeing why bad teams remain bad teams, and it's because they just make terrible decisions from the top down.
But do you think that was, like, hindsight being 2020? Yes, we can say that was a terrible decision. But if you were in the position of the New York Giants GM, would you have made the same?
No, because he was your only good player.
Okay.
I mean, he was your only good offensive player that you had. You had no other weapons. I mean, last year at receiver, they were running out, Wan'Dale Robinson, Darius Slayton, Isaiah Hodgins. Like, they had no skill position talent whatsoever. It was just Saquon. He was all they had last year. He accounted for more percentage of their offense than any other player did for any other team. And so then, and you look at another angle of it, Malik Neighbors has been really, really good to start his career. Like, if they had Saquon Barkley and Malik Neighbors, they might have had a chance to make some noise offensively this year. But instead, like, they can't really get Malik Neighbors the ball because their quarterback play has been so bad, and teams are starting to roll coverage to him, and they don't have anyone else. And it's like Saquon would take a lot of pressure off of Daniel Jones and would have really opened up the passing game for for Malik Neighbors. So it's just it was a horrible decision.
All right, I got to ask you one more question about the NFL.
Okay.
Who are the Pittsburgh Steelers? Listen, they're 8-3 on the year. All right, they beat Atlanta in Atlanta. They beat Denver in Denver. They beat the Rams, or they beat the Chargers. Excuse me. They lost to the Colts, lost to Dallas. Then they won 5 straight games after that. In that time frame, beating Washington and Baltimore. I would say 2 of the teams that most NFL fans would say are 2 of the top tier teams in the NFL is Washington and Baltimore. And then they come out on Thursday and lose to Cleveland 24-19. Who are they, dude? Like, what's going on?
This is just who the Steelers are every single year. This is what they do. They lose to bad teams. Like, you go back and look, they lose to bad teams every year. It's just what they do. I don't know why, but they always play down to their competition. And I think really at the end of the day, they're an extremely good defensive team that has a lot of limitations offensively. And so I'm sure they'll make the playoffs. Maybe they win a playoff game, but their ceiling is just capped because their offense is mediocre. It's not. They're not horrible. It's not horrible.
I mean, they've got good players. They got George Pickens. They got Najee Harris. They got. Let me ask you this: if you were Pittsburgh, if you were Mike Tomlin, would you start Justin Fields or would you go with Russ?
Definitely Russ. The offense
Really?
has been much better with Russ.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, Justin Fields couldn't get the ball to George Pickens whatsoever, and that is their receiving weapon. So I think
hold on.
Calvin Austin.
That is not their only receiving weapon. Thank you, sir. Memphis' own, baby.
Yeah, but Calvin is more of a deep threat guy.
He's a specialist. He's
not really an every down receiver that you can give 10 targets a game. So I think definitely they're a better team with Russ at the helm. But I think their upside's limited. I mean, like, they have George Pickens, they just don't have much receiving help after that. And Najee's kind of a plotter, like he's not gonna do a ton, and Jalen Warren's been banged up this year. I think they're a really solid team. I think they're just limited. So I wouldn't consider them a Super Bowl contender. I mean, I don't. There's not a lot of teams. Yeah. There's not a lot of teams that want to see them just because their defense is so good, but they're not truly a Super Bowl contender in my book.
Interesting. Yeah, it definitely feels like that with Pittsburgh. They are just like the most consistent franchise ever. They'll win quite a few games, lose quite a few games, and they're just there all the time.
They're just middle of the road.
They're just there all the time. Yeah.
Sure.
All right, last topic before we get out of here. It is Monday night, November 25th. It is now 6:55. In 5 minutes, Ja Morant will be tipping off against who are the Grizzlies playing tonight? The Blazers. Yes, they need a win. They need another against the lowly Blazers. The last time that Memphis faced off against the Blazers, they put a beating on Portland to the point where Chauncey Billups, the head coach for Portland, was like, "Yeah, we suck. Like, we're terrible." They've done pretty well since. They've got obviously rookie Donovan Clingan on their team. They got Anthony Simons. They've got Scoop, who's been terrible for them. Jesus. The biggest blunder we've ever made at Bluff City Media was calling out Charlotte for picking Brandon Miller over Scoot Henderson.
Who did that?
Me.
You did?
I called Charlotte an unserious franchise.
That didn't age well.
That did not age well. Do you know how often I get comments in the Bluff City Media YouTube channel picking on that clip and going, that didn't age well. That didn't age well. It's fair. It's a fair critique. But Ja's coming back, man. He's been out for 2 weeks. Obviously, Grizzlies have been once again just hammered by injuries again. The difference, I think, this year is that it feels like a lot of those injuries are more injuries that are not as long term. They're short term. Ja's hip literally dislocated. He got undercut by some kid from Los Angeles, the Lakers. I said his name earlier. I can't remember it now, but got his hip dislocated, but he's back. The Grizzlies, man, are they're an up and down team right now, and I think a lot of that is due to the fact that they're injured. I mean, they are
Christian Coloco.
Christian Coloco. Yeah, they are 10-7 on the year, 6-3 at home. what are your thoughts on Ja coming back? Just the Grizzlies as a whole. Have you been able to watch much of them this year?
Yeah, I think like you said, the biggest thing for them is health because it's hard to really analyze them as a team because we haven't seen them fully healthy. It's been a long time. I mean, it's been
Like 2 seasons.
it's
2
been
seasons.
like 2 years since we've seen them healthy. So it's good to see Ja coming back. Obviously, now we know Vince Williams is going to be out for a while after his ankle sprain, his ankle injury. GG Jackson, they've got to get him back at some point. It's like it's never ending with this team. It's like when we finally see the light at the end of the tunnel and it's like we're gonna get to see this team play together, something happens. That's what we were thinking at the beginning of the year, and then Ja gets injured, and it's like, well, that didn't last very long. So I think for them, they're doing a good job of keeping their head above water. I mean, they're 10-7. They've been really competitive. They've been solid all season. But now it's just like, okay, get healthy, and let's see what they've got. And what do you, for you, obviously someone who is way more NBA oriented than I am, how good do you believe that they can be at full health? Like, how dangerous is this team when they're fully healthy? Because something that we've talked about a lot over the last couple of years is all these injuries have given these guys an opportunity to make a name for themselves. And it's like, now you see Santi, now you see Jake Arabia, now you see, what Gigi has done, Scottie Pippen, Vince Williams. They've really been able to bring in like a whole new crop of talent that they can use. So what is this team at full health?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think that you're also you missed, I think, the biggest one, or the 2 biggest ones, and that's the rookies this year, Jalen Wells and Zach Edey. Jalen Wells is another one of those other second round draft picks that is literally making certain members of the Grizzlies, the veteran members of the Grizzlies, expendable, right?
Yeah.
There's some really nice trade packages that are being bantered around, because of the emergence of Jalen Wells. I mean, he's playing his tail off, but
don't forget Jay Huff too,
and then Jay Huff as well. But Jay's one of those guys, man. Like it is tough. Like the question I have, and it's something we've discussed on the Anthony Saint Show numerous times, is we talk about the Grizzlies' depth a lot, but is the Grizzlies' depth fraudulent? Because
we just don't know.
Number one, we don't know, and number two, like we look at a guy like GG Jackson and we say that kid last year when he came in and did his thing, that guy showed flashes of being like a potential NBA superstar.
Yeah, but
has he ever done that in the role that he would be asked to do that with Ja, Desmond, and Jerry playing together? Right,
and there's just a lot of unknowns around 100%.
And so we have all this depth on the Grizzlies team, but yet what in the wash when everything flows? Because let's be frank about it, bro. Like, for this team to be in that championship window that we think that they're in, it has to run through Jaren, Desmond, and Ja. Like those are the 3 guys. And I would even say, this might be kind of a hot take, I would even say it's Ja, Jaren, and maybe take Desmond out of that equation, right? Like I think Dez is awesome, but I don't think Dez is one of those guys that you go, it has to run through him. Like it is Ja and Jaren are the centerpieces of this team. Jaren has become dominant in the
they go as those 2 go. Right. Desmond's one of those players that you have to have.
You have to have him because he's an elite 3-point shooter. But anyway, I still have to say, so all these parts that they have, like, I am ready to find out if the sum of the parts is better than the parts, right? Like, what is that phrase? Like, where it's like,
I don't know. I know what you're trying to say, but I don't have it either right now.
But it's like it's like we have all these parts, and on paper these parts look like they could really fit well together, but we don't know. And
and I think that's the biggest question is, can Taylor Jenkins make all these things fit together and work together? Yeah. Because you look down the list and it's like, oh my gosh, there's almost too many players that have been productive now.
There is.
And it's, how does it work? How do you spread out the minutes? Who is going to be able – let's use Gigi and Vince as a big example because we saw a big sample size last year, but it's not the same role. It's not the same team. how do they integrate into this team where they're not, they're not the guys. Like, it's not like green light for you all the time. We're not playing for anything, so just go develop.
100%.
Now it's how do you take that and how do you
Yeah.
fit that into this team? And the same thing for a lot of these guys. I mean, Scottie Pippen's one of those guys.
Right.
Jay Huff, who's been productive this year, is one of those guys. Jalen Well, like there's like 6 or 7 of these guys.
Yes.
How do they fit in? Like
Yes.
how do you make it work? Because
how do you fit them into a role that produces a championship team? Because right now it's 100% what you're saying. Like a guy like Gigi, we have never seen him and Ja on the floor together ever.
Which is crazy to think about.
It's wild, right? So when Gigi was out there playing, Gigi had all the shots in the world. But how is Gigi going to fit? Brevin Knight talks about this all the time. It's about roles. Like he talks about how he would come back and play, and he'd be in Orange, New Jersey, and just busting ass over there, like beating dudes over the head in a basketball game. They'd be like, "Bro, why aren't you doing that in the NBA?" And he's like, "Because that's not what they asked me to do."
Right.
The NBA is more about roles than I think any other league that there is in terms of what a coach asks a certain player to do. Every one of those dudes could ball out and put 40 up if they wanted to.
100%.
But that's not what they're asked to do.
Right.
And so what is Gigi's role gonna be when they have all of their dudes who have the roles are in place? What is Gigi's role gonna be? What is Jake's role gonna be? What is Jalen Wells' role gonna be? Number one, the biggest question is, what is Marcus Smart's role? Who is he? You brought him in to be a starting small forward for your team and a potential backup point guard. Well, now you got Scottie Pippen. What's his role?
Right.
Who is Marcus Smart for this team?
Yeah.
It's just wild, man.
Yeah. I think you completely agree. Like, the Grizzlies have all the pieces they need to be a championship competing caliber team. And I think maybe not locally you'll hear that as much, but I think we understand, like, there's a lot of talent on this team. There's a lot of good players on this team.
Yeah.
So can Taylor Jenkins put it together? That is the outstanding question from all of this. Is you've got the pieces. You've had all this time to develop these players now because you had a lost year, and you did a good job of that. Like, we've seen a lot of these guys outproduce the expectations.
Right.
But can you put it all together and make it work and go make a run at it?
And can it be put together? That's the question. That is absolutely the question. But they're playing tonight. Ja's back, man. I hope he stays healthy, bro.
Yeah, that's another big question is can he stay on the floor? He's coming back. Can he stay on the floor? You got anything else, Kenny? Are you good?
I'm good, brother.
All right.
Fun show to hang out. Nice to hang out with you, brother.
Yeah, it's nostalgic. Something we hadn't done in a minute.
We hadn't done just me and you together by ourselves. We haven't done it in a while.
Yeah. Screw you, Gabe. Get out of here.
Screw you.
But we appreciate you guys for joining us. If you are watching on YouTube, you can like, subscribe, and comment there wherever you get your podcast, whether that is Apple or Spotify. You can do the same things there. You can also go to bluffcitymedia.co, check out all the articles, podcasts, and videos on the site. Once again, we thank you guys for joining us, and we'll see you back here next week.
Thank you for listening to On the Bluff. If you enjoyed this episode, leave a rating and a review wherever you download your podcasts. Also, like and subscribe to Bluff City Media's YouTube page. Head over to www.bluffcitymedia.co for comprehensive coverage of Memphis sports and how you can become an insider.